Welcome to Stratcom Podcasts. I'm your host, Kübra Akoç, a journalist at TRT World. Today we are going to talk about cybersecurity. And joining me now is Eddy Willems, who is a cybersecurity expert. Eddy, great to have you here.
Hello.
So let's start with basics. What are the basics of cybersecurity? For someone who has no idea about what this term means, what does cybersecurity mean? How would you describe it?
Well, I think it's the cybersecurity is everything about security online, and meaning that there is a lot of involved like that. It's much more than we think sometimes. So it's the security about your machine, your devices you work with, meaning that it's your PC or that it can be your mobile phone. But it also involves yourself, because sometimes yourself is also very involved in it, because you may click on the wrong link or something like that, or you could make the wrong decision. So cybersecurity is something like a combination of all these kind of cyber problems, online and also on your computers.
Yeah, great. And I watched your TEDx talk about these basics of cybersecurity. You're mentioning a tale of two fluffies, right?
Yes.
Can you please give us a short insight about that story? Because I really enjoyed it. So maybe our audience would also see it, but just a little bit.
Yeah. It's two nice stories actually, and I combined those two stories actually to show what really is going on and what is really going wrong in society sometimes. One of them is, of course, is going back really a long time. It's going back to 1989 when I received a floppy disk, and these days I still I still need to explain what a floppy is, but it's like it's like a USB stick, but it's on a small disk which is very flexible. Anyway, I received that floppy, and my manager was asking me at that moment, Eddy, can you have a look at this? And I was actually wondering what it would do. Actually, I was working for an insurance company. And actually, when I put it in my computer, it was asking me a lot of questions about the AIDS disease. Now, at some point, I thought, okay, it's not interesting. I wanted to throw away the diskette at some point. Now, a couple of days later on, when I used that program, my PC, my computer blocked completely and was me locking out of the whole system. So I couldn't do anything anymore. And the only thing I could really do was, typing enter, and then it was asking me for something like $189 to send in an envelope to a PO box in Panama. I thought, what is happening over there? Think about it, because nobody did know that bugs existed, and nobody knows that viruses existed at that moment as well. So I thought there is a bug in that program or something like that. But it turned out that it was actually the first ransomware at that moment. I got a solution for it as well. And by doing that, actually, I came really into the antivirus industry, the security industry. So it was part of my whole life at that moment. It's a very strange kind of thing, a small thing happening, but I think the listeners over here can just watch the TEDx talk, and that explains much more than I can say today, But it's actually, it was it's the first ransomware, and meaning that it was ransoming my machine, and it was asking money to unlock it. And I was one of the first ones in the whole world to got that thing in front of me. I thought, wow, what is this?
It's terrifying.
Yeah, and now it's everybody has it, and now every company has it. Actually, the whole world, it became an industry, and this is something people seems not to know and seems not to realize. It became really such a big, heavy industry. It's even bigger than the gaming industry. These cyber criminals are at this moment, and that's a very, very problematic thing.
Yeah.
But yeah,
it is really interesting. So thanks for sharing this. So about this cybersecurity issue with pandemic, so everyone started to use Zoom, right? Even we are recording this on Zoom itself. So one of the main, like it made all the headlines around the world, this Zoom lawsuit. And everyone was wondering what was the case. Google and Zoom, they were arguing about some stuff. Can you give us a little bit more insight? What was that case about actually? So was it related to cybersecurity or it was something else? Because mainly it was seen as a cybersecurity issue.
Yes, of course. Well, in the beginning, of course, Zoom wasn't completely ready for, having this pandemic. Everybody, a lot of people worked from home at some point. And then, of course, it happened that, Zoom was like flooded with people using the system. And actually, it was not ready for it in the beginning. So they didn't even got a password to log in, which is now required, of course, and actually automatically given at the beginning. But that wasn't the case in the beginning. And there were a lot of flaws inside the Zoom program as well. And that caused a lot of problems in the beginning. But that's also possibly one of the reasons, of course, why also Google took some action against it and they ask, can you solve these kind of things? Because otherwise we will have much more security problems than we possibly will see in the future. And of course, a lot of things were resolved. A lot of things were resolved in Zoom. A lot of things were also solved in a lot of other Zoom-like programs like Teams. So a lot of these kind of technologies have been used and also been misused in the beginning to try to spread some malware as well on the systems. But the good part of that is that most of the problems are resolved now.
Got it. Thanks for clarifying for us. So I have this is a personal question. So it's about facial recognition technology. So my iPhone or other telephones like Galaxies, everyone now using facial recognition technology to unlock your phone, right? And like a couple of years ago, I think an app got popular called Face App. So we were just uploading our faces into the app, and it was just changing us to our older versions or just younger version or some celebrity or some stuff. And at that time, I remember there was like a lot of speculation about like, oh my God, they are stealing our faces, like they are stealing our identity and just putting them in some pool, so they will be using for some criminal activity, blah, blah, blah. Like some of them turned out to be like wrong, of course, but some people were still like worried about somebody might be stealing their faces. So should we be scared of this facial recognition technology? How do you see is it developing? How do you see is it going?
Well, it's an evolution, of course. And on one side, it's a good thing because we can do a lot of interesting things with it. It makes our lives much more easier because if we want to use our mobile phones, for instance, we can just watch it and look at it and it's opening automatically without giving your PIN code or whatever. The same for, of course, your PC. It's actually the same thing. It's the same technology. So these are definitely good things. And it's not always a negative perspective that we have to look at it, in my opinion. But on the other side, face recognition can be misused as well. Because where don't you see cameras these days anymore? You see cameras everywhere. Now, it doesn't mean that cameras have the technologies built inside or that there is software behind it that it can recognize faces. So that's another thing. I think it's all depending on the laws, depending in the countries itself where you are going to. And that's a very big, important thing to look at. We all know if we go to China, for instance, they do have different laws about face recognition. So it is much more easier that you are recognized over there by a face recognition camera than you think if you compare it by going into Turkey to, on the streets or in Europe or in the States, for instance. So it all depends a little bit from where you are. I think so. It depends from the country's laws. It also depends from, in Europe, for instance, we have something like the GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation. And that law is actually regulating more or less what can be shared, what can be saved on servers, etc., and something like that. And the good thing is that it is a little bit regulated like that over here, but that's not everywhere. So yes, there are very good things in it. On the other side, we have to be very careful because, well, every kind of app can use this sometimes, and maybe just look at where the app comes from and if you should activate it or not, or something like that. It's always the best. And if you have, and the same goes for the country itself as well, that's so, a lot of positives and a lot of negatives, I think, as well.
Got it. So regarding this information and data protection case, I think this is different for maybe celebrities and government officials, but like just one individual or just ordinary people, how vulnerable are we to hacking, or just how vulnerable are we to like someone stealing our information, our location services on which is saved on our mobile phones or just saved on our laptops? How vulnerable are we?
Well, of course, we are all vulnerable because we are using mobile phones and we are using PCs. But mobile phones itself are like, pocket PCs in your pockets, they can do actually much more than a normal PC can do sometimes. And that's, some people don't ignore this kind of thing. The thing is, we have seen cases this year like Pegasus software, which is kind of software which is spying on mobile phones, also spying on PCs and Macs, of course. But particularly, it was a very interesting case because a lot of leaders, political leaders, a lot of people from the press, a lot of NGOs, a lot of organizational people. Let us say a lot of people were spied on just because of, these things can be sold as well. And this is what we saw, of course, during the Pegasus case. Pegasus was created by the NSO Group, which is actually a company which is, of course, creating these kind of stuff and creating this kind of software. And it's actually selling this to whoever who wants it. And of course, that is a big range of, ranging from, of course, it's intelligence services. There could be governmental services from all over the world, and that's something you can't really stop in the beginning. Now, on the good side is that America, the States, is actually taking a little bit action against these kind of things because they are trying to ban more or less the NSA group and try to stop these kind of things. And I think this is I think this is a good thing, because if this goes on, and if nobody is taking action against something like that, or taking action against similar companies, because there are other companies like the NSO Group as well, which are also developing this kind of software, then nothing is happening. And now at least something is happening, and at least something can be, we possibly think that it could be, improve at least in the future. However, on the other side, malware will be always there, and malware is controlled by cyber criminals. And that cyber criminals is, of course, they are not related to these kind of strange, weird companies, and they want to make money. And those kind of cyber criminals will always try to, spy on us, or try to get our money, or try to get our banking credit card details or whatever. And that is something which will still continue also in 2020 and 2022 and 2023 and in the future. This is not going to stop very soon, in my opinion.
I see. Lastly, I want to ask you about the book you wrote, Cyber Danger, right? I
Yes.
didn't read it yet, but maybe I'd like to read it, and maybe from our audience, some people would like to read it. How would you describe, like, what are the main points of your book? I think you are giving some useful tips about data and information protection. If you can mention a little bit, then hopefully we can conclude the podcast.
Yeah, well, I think it's a nice, interesting book just for everybody who is interested in the subject. It is not actually, I didn't create it, I didn't wrote it for experts. However, experts are also reading it. So I really created it for everybody interested in the subject of cybersecurity. So what is going wrong? What can you do about it? There are a lot of tips inside it. There are a lot of, how should I say, anecdotes in it as well. So meaning, well, the story of my diskette is in it. There is another story is how I infected the whole airport in it as well. There are a lot of other real stories inside it, which happened in my life. And they also stimulate, or they actually, how should I highlight more or less the problems related inside cybersecurity. Interesting as well, for people, who want to read something completely different. At the end, there is a small science fiction short story in it.
Oh, great.
With actually real people. So real people who exist in real life, and actually giving you a view in the future, what can happen. And I think that made it also a little bit very special as well. And there is also a couple of comments from a lot of experts also inside it. So I wrote it, but there are, I think, about 20 expert advices about all the problems related to cybersecurity as well in it.
Great. Looking forward to read it.
Cyber Danger, that's the name.
Cyber Danger, yeah. Cyber Danger. Eddy Willems, thanks for being with us. Thanks for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.